Hello, my name is Christopher, and today I'll be talking about exception handling. Now, what exception handling is basically a way for your code to handle errors. Another way to look at exception handling will be to see it as error handling, since exceptions and errors are pretty much the same thing. Now, the reason that we use exception handling is so that when you run your code, it doesn't crash due to an error, most of the time due to user input, but instead it prints out a message that you have that you've already written. Now, the code that I'll be talking about today that uses exception handling will be this code that I use for my final project, which is a player driver. I will be using a try catch block today for exception handling, and there's two here. So let's get into it. So first, let me give a brief description of what this code does. It creates a player and then asks the user for multiple inputs for the different parameters this variable, this player object will need, and then inputs them. Then there's also this print writer, which requires this IO exception catch block here. But today I'm going to focus on this input mismatch exception catch block. Alright, so when you run the code, you'll be prompted all these things, and then if at any point we encounter an input mismatch error, which is like, for example, you input a string where you're supposed to input an integer, or you input a double where you're supposed to input an integer, you'd run into this catch block here. And you'll be prompted with this message telling you that you've inputted a non-numerical value for one of the following, because most of the time it's going to be that you inputted a string where you need to input an integer. So let me run this to give you a better idea of how it works. So let's just create one player here where it tells you to create a player, so it can be simpler. Now enter the name of the player. Let's say John Smith. Then enter the position. Let's say he's a first baseman. First base. Then here, let's create the error here. Alright, so enter the age of the player. You're expected to enter an integer here. But let's say we enter some random letters on accident, just to help you visualize. So we enter letters instead of integers, and this is what we get. The build still runs, but now you get prompted with this message saying that you have inputted a non-numerical value for one of the following: age, yard 40 at-bats, or successful hits, because these are pretty much the only places you'll be able to get an error from input mismatch in where you're prompted above. So now you'll see, as it's usually supposed to print to this file, but instead it doesn't print at all, since we encountered an error and it canceled out the try catch block. So now nothing printed. So now let's show you how it would look when it's successful. So I'm just gonna input a bunch of random information just to show you. Input numbers here, and numbers here. Now this time we had to build successful since everything we inputted matched what it was supposed to. Now let's show you how it's supposed to look when it prints. And this is how it looks when it prints. It prints out all this. So by using this exception handling, it causes the code not to crash, but instead it tells the user where it made an error, so they can fix it on their next go around. So that is exception handling. Thank you.